Hello, good evening, and welcome again to Sunday Night Live. This week is very special to me and to everybody, really. Not just because it's Hanukkah, but because we are joined by a very familiar face, Rabbi Mordechai Ginsbury. It's our honor to have you as part of our broadcast this week, and to welcome you back to Shrubs virtually. And I know when I'm out of my depth, so I'm going to leave both you and Rabbi Eisenberg to converse. I'll be behind the scenes managing the comments. If there's anything you need, just tell me. But without any further ado, I'm going to welcome you both and leave you to it.
Thank you, David. Great pleasure to be virtually back in the Shrubberies.
Nice to have you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much. Good evening to Rabbi Ginsbury. I think for the formalities of the evening, we're going to try to stick to Rabbi Ginsbury. It's actually interesting. I'm thinking back. I was just made myself this note. I don't know if you remember Hanukkah 2012. The Shrubberies was celebrating its 75th anniversary. Yeah. And we had a 75th anniversary dinner, and you were the guest speaker. Do you remember that? That's 8 years ago already. It feels a lot shorter.
I've still got the souvenir benches somewhere here at home.
All right. Yeah, so it's interesting. So now we have Hanukkah 8 years later. We're back together again. Sadly, not in person, but virtually. But at least, you know, it's better than having to not be together. And it's nice to be able to give David Mintz, who's done this really for 6 months straight. So to give David Mintz a break and to thank him so much for all the weeks that he's been doing this Sunday Night Live. It's really been an amazing journey that we've taken together. And one of the things that Corona has brought out, we'll come back to the discussion about Corona a little bit later also. But maybe to start with the question, just what made you decide to become a rabbi? We're going to exchange ideas on this one as well. But you as being the elder statesman, so what made you decide to become a rav or a rabbi, and a rabbi of a traditional community, maybe instead of a Haredi community?
So first of all, good evening, Rabbi Eisenberg. Good evening, listeners in Manchester, in London, and anywhere else. I believe that Izzy Michelle Gable may even be listening in from Florida. So really, it's great to see names coming up from the screen during the course of the evening. I'm sure a great pleasure. What drew me into the rabbinate? Well, you and I, Rabbi Eisenberg, share something very significant in common. We both come from rabbinical families. And my family tell me that at the age of 3, I used to apparently Shabbos afternoon sit my sister in front of me, take a little coffee table as a pulpit, and I would take my little blanket from my cot and put it over my shoulders to talus, and my sister had to sit there listening to my droshes. That's what they tell me. So I guess it started quite early. But I think, being from a rabbinic family does feature significantly. I'll never forget when I first came to the Shrubberies, Alan Creek, Oliver Sholem, who is was the son-in-law of the founder of Rabbi Gerdis, and of course whose own son Ian is now an outstanding president and senior of the community. So Alan came up to me, and as only he could, with a mischievous grin on his face, he said, "Rabbi, I'd like to welcome you. My father-in-law was the founder rabbi of this community, and this is a rabbi-friendly community. In this community, a rabbi has never been stabbed in the front." That was the introductory welcome from Alan Creek of blessed memory. And actually, I have to say that the level of warmth, of friendship is something that we appreciated from day one in the Shrubberies. It's something which remained with us throughout our time there and has continued with many people since. So it's really very special. I think that's one of the special elements of being in the rabbinate, that you only experience when you're actually in the pulpit, actually sitting in the chair yourself, when you realize the relationships you build up, the privilege that one has to be a very significant other in the lives of others, and being able to enhance the experience of others and gently nudge people to the realization of their own spiritual, religious, and Jewish potential. That is a great privilege, and something which I think is a common denominator across the rabbinate.
Yes, I mean, you started with the fact that we had parents who are rabbonim. So my father was also, as you said, my father was a chief rabbi. And I remember it was actually Hanukkah, and I was 12 years old. And they went around, they had a program on television that was called Licht ins Dunkeln, bringing light into the darkness. And we lit Hanukkah candles on live television. They had a whole day, Xmas, they used to have a charity drive on Austrian TV, and they used to have different people performing. And we lit Hanukkah candles because it was one of those years where Hanukkah and Xmas fell at the same time. And afterwards, the fellow came around and he was interviewing. He was one of the head people at the television in Austria at the time. And he asked me a few questions. What's your favorite subject? What school do you go to? And how old are you? And then he said, what do you want to be when you grow up? And I said, chief rabbi. But so at the time, everybody laughed about it. And I think years later, I did get offered the job as a chief rabbi, and I turned it down. So it's interesting. But one of the other things that I actually read about this week, you mentioned to me when we spoke on Thursday night about the article that you wrote in Mishpacha magazine, and the 4 books that you would recommend to young rabbonim. So when I was 16, I actually read that book. It's called Tales Out of Shul. If anybody hasn't read the book, I would recommend it. It gives an interesting insight into what it's like being a pulpit rabbi. And it was interesting even to speak to 2 different people about it. I myself, when I read it, I was extremely inspired by the book. And the book really pushed me in a certain direction. Whereas I found, I met, if you remember, Rabbi Johnny Ross. You know Rabbi Johnny Ross, who was at portray, now he's in London? He said to me, he read the same book. He was never more depressed about reading a book in his life. So therefore, it turned him off the rabbinate entirely. I want to take a quick break over here. Actually, I'm going to say good evening to some of the people that have wished you good evening so far. So we have Sheila Morris. Thank you so much. We have Clive Moss Barkley. It's nice to have you. Francine Davis and hopefully Paul as well. Nice to see the 2 of you. Deborah and Harris, hi, and Rodney and Michelle as well. So nice to have so many people, friendly and familiar faces that were there when your time. Sandy, I'm sorry today David Mintz is not here. He was here right at the beginning, but we're going to be having a discussion about a job for Good Yiddishe Boy. He actually has a job for Good Yiddishe Boy because he's an estate agent. We're both rabbonim, so he didn't really fit into this conversation. So at the moment, he's going to be left out. I'm sorry. So coming back to what I was saying about the book, so that book really inspired me. But I went through like ups and downs in my career and in my life, whether I did want to become, I didn't want to become. But at one point or another, it sort of almost developed into that. So I had done my master's in business administration. I just got married about 5 months after I finished. I was learning in Kollel in Israel, and that 2 years turned into 3 years, turned into 4 years, and I moved back over here. And somehow it just developed into that somebody gave me the application form for over here for the Shrubberies. And Baruch Hashem, when I applied, it was something that we were accepted here, and then I became the Rav over here. And for me, as you said, it's been a tremendous blessing to be involved in people's lives, as you said, in a very intimate way, to see people in their happiest times, to be there to support people in the times of their sadness. I'm sure there are certain stories, or there's certain people, or certain events, happy events or sad events that stand out in your mind from the Shrubberies, don't they?
Absolutely. I mean, I'd come back to one point you mentioned before about Eisenberg, about a Rav you mentioned who just didn't connect with Tales Out of Shul and with the pulpit rabbinate. It's really important to understand that not everyone is cut out to be a common pulpit rabbi. I always remember a story of an aspiring young Kollel student who today is actually a very successful professional, young professional. He wanted to become a pulpit rabbi, and he was invited to a community at rather short notice. And he actually came into the shul, the Shrubberies, standing at the very point that we're virtually occupying at the moment, looking out the community. He wanted to give a trial sermon. So please, I'll listen to you, I'll critique you. He started off a little bit nervous, and he said, look, I've only been given 48 hours notice. It's not really fair, but I'm pleased to be here for Shabbos. But don't judge me on the sermon. It's not very good because I'm not very experienced at giving sermons. And I hope it will be okay. But I have other qualities, and I hope you'll like me. I stopped him at that point. I said to him, this is how I would do it after a good few years of experience. I'd have gone into the pulpit and said, Last Shabbos afternoon, as I was watching the golden glow of the sun setting against the beautiful walls of Yerushalayim, the last place I thought I would be next Shabbos would be in this particular community, where just 48 hours notice coming to speak to you almost unprepared. However, the warmth of welcome is so great and the atmosphere in this community so welcoming that it's just a pleasure to be with you, and I'm delighted to be able to take these few minutes to address you. And I pointed out to him how you can convey exactly the same message in two such very different ways. One is, if I may say so, a little bit of whinging and complaining and saying it's not fair. And the other is saying, look, I'll tell you all the things which are bugging me, but I'll tell them to you in such a way that actually is part of a story I'm going to tell you, which is how I'm going to cope. And I think just like the late, great Rabbi Sachs Zatzal, whose passing we're all still reeling from, put it once to a colleague who was struggling with having to address a very difficult set of circumstances. And Rabbi Sachs said to him, look, the one thing a rabbi has to give to his community is hope. And if one doesn't have that particular quality, and one doesn't have the patience, and one doesn't have that inner sense of calling, don't do it. Just like the poet or the artist has to know from the very depths of their souls that they have to write, they have to paint, this is their calling. A rabbi has to understand in the same way that he and his Robertson, and to some extent his family, I think we may talk about that a little bit later on, we're in slightly different stages in terms of the development of family, but there is this sense of real commitment and understanding of what the role is really all about.
Absolutely, absolutely. And again, I would add to that there are times where, you feel, I guess, as a rabbi, maybe even burnt out from that role. The Rabbanan that might have come into the rabbinate full of hope, full of enthusiasm, willing to give the people that hope that you've mentioned and to stand by people. And after 5 years or 10 years or 15 years, they either feel they can't do it anymore, they feel they don't care as much anymore, they become jaded, they become cynical, whatever you want to call it. And I think even at that point, even if you've started correctly, if you come to a point where you feel it's just not going anymore, then it's time to find another job, even if it's going to be a different job.
So one of the things I've been privileged to do since we've been in London over the last 13 years or so has been to be the professional head of PAIR, Promoting Excellence in Rabbis, which provides in-service training, networking and support, primarily for United Synagogue rabbis. And one of the things we committed ourselves to was providing support for career-long dynamism and vitality. You're quite right. Once the rabbi stops really feeling and having this passionate sense of commitment to the vocation, the calling of the rabbinate, it's going to be problematic. And that's something which I've reflected on in a number of different ways, a number of different scenarios. And perhaps we have to think about how one retains that sense of freshness, that sense of dynamism. But the important thing is certainly not to be expecting that one's self-definition is going to be by the adulation or even the opprobrium of one's actual community. One wants to have a positive, strong, and mutual engagement, caring with the community, but one's self-definition, one's sense of mission has to be from within oneself. And I remember we had a great trainer for PAIR some years ago who said, if you can make your passion your pension, you've got it made. And perhaps that's one of the things we're privileged to. I'm not sure how great the pension is, but at least that sense of the parnossa, perhaps, one's passion is one's parnossa, and one's doing something which is deeply worthwhile and meaningful as well. That is a very great sense of privilege. And I've never taken for granted the warmth of the two loves of my life, other than, of course, my own dear Robertson and family, and that has been the Prestwich Hebrew congregation I had the privilege to serve for 13.5 years, and the Hendon United Synagogue, who have not as yet thrown me out after nearly 22 years.
Wow, is it nearly 22? I remember when it was 20. I remember when they made a special Shabbos for you.
Yep.
It's nearly 22 already.
Coming up, yeah, February 22 years. Who's counting? I just saw Lillian and Morris Brody, great friends from Raleigh Close, who moved to Israel a few years ago, made Aliyah, and it's great to see them here on the program this evening as well.
Very nice. People even from Eretz Yisrael tune in, and we're very privileged to have this program every week. And if you want to tune in on other weeks, so you can want to look back to Shrubs Live on our YouTube channel, you'll be able to see there are many other interesting programs. So maybe let's move on.
And of course, not to forget the Raleigh Close
Absolutely. Sorry. I'm sorry. The broadcast as well. When is that? You can give a plug for that as well, Rabbi Ginsburg.
I just did. Thank you, Rabbi Eisenberg.
When is it? Let people in Shrubberies know when it is. They might want to know when the broadcast will be.
Okay. We've got one on tomorrow night. Something certainly that can tune into through the US Facebook live stream tomorrow evening. It's also available
through the United Synagogue, not directly through the Hendon.
No, this is a Hendon program. I'll send you afterwards the link also to the Zoom for tomorrow night's program as well. We're having Rabbi Dr. Ari Sitner from Yeshiva University on with Divrei Chizuk for Chanukah, then a conversation between 3 or 4 of us Rabbonim here in Hendon.
Oh, very good, excellent. So moving on from there, maybe that as we were discussing that, to lay leadership. I think we were discussing now about communities and the rabbi having his sense of mission. But I think the other thing that a rabbi needs to have is a rabbi needs to have good lay leaders. And I think you've mentioned to me someone actually whose grandson is running this program tonight together with us. But Izzy Mintz is one of those people. But I'm sure there were many others. And when you come back to the Shrubberies, there are, as you said, shadows of people that you see, and there are people that you still see. I mean, there must be a very large amount of people that you look at as lay leaders that really helped shape you and make you who you were.
So Izzy and Rika Mintz, Aleim HaSholem, were outstanding lay leaders of the Presbyterian Hebrew congregation over many years. I can never reflect back on the lay leaders of my time in the community without mentioning Sol Topman, Oliver Sholem, who was the president at the time when I came to the shul. I don't want to go into other names because it's just so difficult. It becomes invidious. I know that current life vice president, a good friend and your good friend Rodney Barkley is, with, as you said, with his dear wife also on this call here this evening. So yes, I mean, good lay leaders are absolutely vital. I don't know if there must be 1 or 2 people who are on this call this evening who will remember my sermon on the Shabbos when it was announced through the Jewish media that I was most probably going to be leaving Shrubberies to come to Hendon. And of course, this is something which one would always like to be in the privileged position of sharing with the community oneself, but one doesn't have that luxury. I know we'll talk about the media and particularly social media nowadays. I think also if we have the time during the course of this conversation. So when I got up into the pulpit that week, I made the observation that yes, it's true, I can't deny it, and you've heard the rumors, and yes, we are most probably going to be moving to London, I said, and it will be the end of a very, very special 13 and a half year connection that we've shared. I said, I want to tell you one thing about the fact that we're moving and we're leaving. It's all your fault. And there was a sort of gasp from the congregation. Not only is this man sort of kicking us in a painful way by leaving us back, he's not blaming us as well. And then I went on to explain how much I felt that the congregation had made me and enabled me to grow together with Judy and our children into the Rabbi, the Robertson, and the rabbinic family that we had become. And we still reflect back very, very fondly on those years. I mean, I think there should be a third person in this conversation, actually. Surely Rick Shaw, now retired emeritus caretaker of the Shrubberies, through almost all the years I was there, and I know pretty much most of your years so far of Eisenberg. And believe it or not, some of you may know this, but his son, Eamon, is actually our shul caretaker at Raleigh Close in Hendon. So there's another connection between the two shuls.
Yeah. I mean, if I think of lay leadership, there are certain lay leaders that I feel that I've learned a tremendous amount from, and again, there's so many lay leaders that you feel really indebted to. I think one of the people that's been there literally from the start is Ian Creek. I mean, Ian Creek, as you mentioned before, almost indefatigable. He's just, you can't get this guy off the executive. If he's not the vice president, he's the Gamba. If he's not the Gamba, he's the president. And he's always putting out the Shrubberies Times, and he's always here. I mean, it's unbelievable to see the amount of dedication. And when we speak about lay leaders, I think part of what we speak about is the fact that people are willing to dedicate days and nights to be able to create the shul that we are in, that keep the wheels going. Because there's so much, as Rabbonim, we're privileged to that, and many people in the community aren't privileged to it, unless you've been part of the executive, as to how much it really takes to keep a shul going. And the Shrubberies is quite a bit smaller, I think, than the Hendon United Synagogue. It probably takes even more to keep the Hendon United Synagogue going.
Absolutely. I think the rule of good lay leaders is, as Winston Churchill said in the course of the Second World War, that never was so much owed by so many to so few. You do tend to have and need to have a very significant core cadre of lay leadership. And I think one of the great secrets of the Shrubs is seeing the fact that Ian, whose grandfather was the founder of, whose father was one of the distinguished Gaboim, and I think an alderman of the shul as well. Likewise, David, with his grandfather Izzy and his uncle Stephen, also have been a prominent balabas over many years in the shul. This does make such a difference to the community. We have a continuity. But I think today one of the things we're experiencing, certainly here in London, is that the rate of turnover is greater than it was, and people's lives are moving on at such a pace, and the demands are so great that I think it's not just we've got to think about the burnout where the Rabbonim are concerned. There can be burnout where lay leaders are concerned as well, and your type of engagement that you're speaking about with Ian and David and others, and I can think of other good friends from our years in the Shrubs. This is something which I don't think is so much the norm anymore nowadays, although it is an absolutely wonderful and much to be vaunted quality if one's able to find it.
But I think I would also mention, I think this is a very important thing, on top of the lay leadership, I really, the set of people that I really feel a tremendous amount of akar satov to. Maybe let's just take a quick break because we had a few other people that had said hello. So we had David Langer and Andrea. So we want to wish you also hello, especially, I have a very fond memories driving down with David and Andrea to your daughter's wedding that time.
Thank you.
Yeah, as well as Anthony Marks. We got Robert Nathan who said hello, Brian Cohen who said hello, and Robert
we have the pleasure of Robert's son Edward being one of our members actually together with his
that's what I said.
Yeah.
So what I was saying is, I think the other set of people, when you speak about people all the time, and I think these are sometimes, I think unfairly, people blame the rabbi for having his favorites within the shul. I don't know if you've had that. Sometimes you get people that say, Rabbi, you seem to have a better relationship with certain people. And I think the way I see it is, I love all the people in the community. However, there are people that I see almost every single day. And there are people I see literally every single day. And those people that come every single day, I can't but have a closer relationship with them because I have so much more to do with them than with people that come once a week or once a month or once a year. But those are the other heroes, even though they're not lay leaders. The other heroes to me of shuls are those people that are the daily minyan men that come. And by us, it's not such a large amount. I don't know if you had more in your days, but if we'd say 15 to 18 men that are the daily men that come between them almost every single day, they're the ones to, they're also ones to salute because they really do so much for the shul in a tremendous way. So we have one of your members as well.
I just noticed Barry Fiber, one of our members from Riley Close, saying he's enjoying the discussion, and it's nice to see, as I say, the interplay between our two communities on this particular discussion. When you say about favorites, that's a really difficult thing and something that I would try to avoid as much as possible. I saw Deborah Fraser just mentioning about Shalom Goblet of Shalom. Of course, Shalom is someone I have to mention. I actually have a personal Megillah, which Shalom was responsible for arranging as a farewell present from a dozen or so members when we left Manchester for London. And I still lean from that every Purim and think of Shalom, with whom I kept up a warm connection through the years after we'd left for Ali Close. And I also used to even visit him after the time when he was sadly afflicted with not such good health, to use a euphemism. But to come back to the point about favorites, first of all, I want to make, and I've always tried to make the point, that anyone who wants to try and have a connection with myself, my family, my wife, to the extent that it's possible to do so, I will make time available. And Absolutely. One of the things I've started over the years is, after Shachris, I actually picked this up from a friend of mine, Rabbi Yisrael Fine, a friend and colleague, who was the Rav in Cockfosters for many years. Just a 20-minute, half an hour chavrusa in the morning after davening for someone who wants to have that. Just an opportunity during non-COVID times. It's been more difficult for Judy to replicate this by Zoom, but she had a chevra of women who used to come on a Tuesday night to Ladies' Seed, and it really became Schmooze with Judy in its most recent iteration, and would just sit and would learn, but would talk and have an opportunity to interact. And as much as one can do that, it's available. But people sometimes say, not just about davening or lay leadership. People say, Rabbi, you give a Gemara shir on a Thursday night, the shir that I give, and you know, we have I don't know. At the moment, we've started doing Masechta, so it's a bit of an increase. 15 people, 20 people perhaps who are joining the shir. So, you know, Rabbi, there's hundreds of people out there. You know, are you investing all this time? You've got to prepare for the shir. You've got to make sure that you're canvassing people for the shir. You're giving the shir. Is it really worth it? And I say there's a principle of religious electromagnetics. What do I mean by that? If you think of shul life as a pyramid. Now, some of you may remember Sheila Morris, who you mentioned before, was kind enough to say hello, came to our turn Friday night into Shabbos with her husband, Phil, and with their son, Gary, who is now Gershon, and the rest was history. They came to that turn Friday night into Shabbos. And one of the amazing things about that was the opportunity that we actually took to reach out to all different levels of the community. We divide the community into those who came every week, those who came every month, those who came really just a few times a year. And one of the things that we considered in that particular context was phoning and reaching out to those who really have the most ephemeral relationship with the shul. They're perhaps what you might call traditionally your payers rather than your prayers. And some of them said the following. They said, Rabbi, if we want you, we'll let you know. But other than that, we don't want you to sort of drive us, and they say it a bit more politely than that, but we don't want you to drive us crazy with religion or whatever. We're comfortable. We'll tell you if we need you, etc. And there is something about recognizing that for a shul to work, there is indeed this principle, whether it's in shiurim, whether it's in minyanim, whether it's even the lay leadership for the shul, that there has to be this inner core who work together. And I have one particular member of our community with whom I'm very, very close to this day, both his wife and himself, close with Judy and myself. And when he joined the shul executive, although he was a very talented professional in his own way, highly competent and put his talents to the benefit of the shul for a goodly number of years, he actually said, one of the reasons I want to take on this role is because I want to develop a more significant connection with you. And it's open for anybody to come and do that. We never fill with ease all of our, so it's there and it's available. And obviously there can't be the same depth and strength of connection with everybody, but to the best of our ability, we are there for everyone. I must also mention, I said it's invidious once I start mentioning names, but dear Reuben Valance, Shalom, who was warden when we came to the shul, was president during the time of the shul, and just worked so hard for the benefit of the community. And there are many, many others. And forgive me if we don't get through every particular name and common denominator for us all during this conversation this evening.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, when I say again the word of favorite, it's more the way other people view it than the way I view it. I don't see people as favorites, but I think, as I said, you know, as you said, the relationship is there for the taking. Anybody who wants to come in can. It's interesting. I was having a similar conversation with my father just this week, And I was speaking to him about, I don't know, somebody very traditional or somebody had married down, and he said to me, this is what they want. You know, they don't want it, and some people, they don't want it any differently. And you have to sort of respect them. You can reach out to them, and if they want to take you up on it, great. And if they don't want to take you up on it, then that's something that you have to respect as well. But there will be those people that come every day with whom we will forge very, very close relationships. And those will, for example, be the people that will band together at the end before you leave and buy you that menorah because they have, or that Megillah, sorry, because they have a very different level relationship with you as well, as do many of the other people within the shul. I think we move on from there. Maybe if you mentioned your wife quite a few times, I'll just mention a few people that have been, Romney says, Michelle has been lucky to have such great Robertsons. You know, I can only speak for my wife, and I know your wife is also well known. My wife has spoken to her many times, and she's gotten tremendous amounts of feedback from her as well. We have over here a few other people that had said hello. Brian Sternfeld had said hello. We have as well Doreen Cohen saying this is Simon, I guess, is watching with his mother Doreen, and she wants to say hello to both of you.
Thank you.
So Clyde Moss Barkley mentions, and I'd like to come back to this, and I'll come back to the comment. Maybe we'll see Richard's comment first. Is we're blessed at the Shrubberies to have so many volunteers who help keep the shul running. The more involved you become, the more you appreciate just how many people we have who help out in so many different ways. That's very true. You know, we've been very, very blessed here at the Shrubberies to have, especially amongst the youth, Richard being one of them, that are willing to really put in the time and effort to make sure that there are so many programs that go on for the children. They've interviewed and they've sat together to make sure that we got a youth leader, and they're willing to put in not only the time and effort, but really the emotion that goes behind it. And really, really, so many people are willing to get involved. And I think, for example, we had this, I don't know if you had something similar in your show, Rabbi Ginsbury. We had before Rosh Hashanah, we had the idea, it wasn't my idea, but we ran with it. It was a beautiful idea to put together a little parcel from the community to give out to all the members. And then we ran a drive-through on a Sunday, and we had 100, 150 people that came to the drive-through. But in the end, we were still left with another 100, 150 parcels to give out. And we had asked the community, anybody who'd like to deliver. And we had to turn people down because so many people came forward to say, yes, I'm happy to deliver 4 or 5 parcels. And some people came back twice or 3 times. I'm going to Whitefield anyway. I'll go there and I'll go here and give me this one, give me that one. It's been, we are really, really blessed. I would go back to what Richard says over here and really echo that. But I think at the forefront, there will always be certain people that put in even more work than the regular people. Richard being one of them, being part of our executive, being part of the youth committee. But one of the things that Clyde Moss Barkley points out over here, and it's something that I know you've had Will Kintish coming to your giving some lectures at Pe'er as well, and something Will Kintish taught me as well, and he's got it from Dale Carnegie, is that names are so important in the rabbinate, and that if you forget people, if somebody comes over and wishes you good Shabbos, and they've been in shul 3 or 4 times and introduced themselves to you 3 or 4 times, and you still don't remember their name, I have had it that people feel a little bit slighted. How come you remember them? You don't remember who I am. And here Clive says, and he said it to me a few times, we're amazed how you still manage to remember all our names even after 20 years. And I think the real relationships come out, and that's what you said in the beginning, that the rabbinate is about creating those real relationships. And when you create those lasting relationships, then they're not just, Mr. or Mrs. So-and-so. You remember everybody's names even 20 years later.
Yeah. There's a lot of ground you've covered there. Let's start with the Robertsons. Because a tremendous amount of what I've been able to achieve has only really been through Judy's patience, inspiration, understanding, support. I've said it on more than one occasion. I've said it in Shrubs. I've said it here in Hendon as well. And that is that a Robertson traditionally is someone who's married to a rabbi. But there are some rabbis who are rabbis because they're married to Robertsons. And I certainly feel that in significant part, that has been a very, very major aspect of what we've been able to achieve within the rabbinate. I just saw Izzy and Michelle coming up there on the chat, and all the way from Florida. Lovely to being
amazing to see that.
and we actually had the pleasure and privilege when Izzy Michelle got married in Los Angeles. Must be around 20 or so years ago now that we actually flew out there and were with them for the wedding, and that was a very, very special occasion. It's wonderful that we're still in contact. We email, we even see each other from time to time, more when they're visiting here than we're visiting the States. But that's a great pleasure, that sort of depth of connection. But every step of the way, I have to say that if it's not a joint enterprise between the Rabbi and Robertson, I'm not saying it can't work. There are some amazing examples where it does work, but I personally would struggle hugely without that inspiration. I remember very fondly going back to lay leaders in the wider community. Sir Sidney Hamburg, Oliver Shon, wrote the most beautiful letter to Judy and I at the time when we left Manchester about how he admired us not just for our individual qualities but as a rabbinic couple. And maybe that's an area our conversation can still go into as far as rabbinic couples. And when you say about teams and the way that you did things with the pastors, yes, we've all been doing that. We have an amazing Hendon Cares support team whose chair, Michael Kay, I think is actually on this call this evening as well. And we've been keeping in contact regularly with our over 70s, over 75s, over 80s. We just did a project for Hanukkah where the young children of the community made Hanukkah cards, greeting cards for the older people and hand delivered them. We've been delivering United Synagogue's central essential boxes to various people in the community who have a need for that sort of support. Before, we had a bit of a funny story. Before Rosh Hashanah, Judy came up with this idea. We had special chocolate lollipops made with the shul's logo on it by the chocolatier, a Hechshed business here in London who make various beautiful different types of chocolate art, etc. And we had these prepared, and the kids came into the drive-through. The idea was we were going to give them out. The only problem was one of our twins who are our post-Manchester bonus, were born here when we were in London, and all our other children, our Manchester children, whom the community would remember, all, thank God, married with their own children now. Twins have just come up to 18, and one of them really didn't feel well the night before Rosh Hashanah, ended up at the Royal Free Hospital, and they did a COVID test, which meant we all had to immediately self-isolate, which meant I was facing not being in shul over Rosh Hashanah, which meant that, and Judy and I both had COVID quite early on, Purim Pesach time. We couldn't go to this drive-through. Our wonderful associate Rabbi Tzvi Portnoy, who is also has his origins in Manchester, his dear parents, Rabbi Joel and Robertson Ruthie Portnoy, of course, were for many, many years the Rov and Robertson in Hale. And in fact, our previous associate Rabbi Yisrael Binstock and his wonderful Robertson Leanne are now the Rov and Robertson in Hale. So it's funny how the rabbinate is a little bit of a merry-go-round in certain ways, hopefully merry more than go round. But at any rate, he sort of took over at the last minute, gave these beautiful little chocolate lollipops out to all the kids as they drove through with their parents, COVID secure, etc. Thank goodness our GP, I have a wonderful local practice here, and one of the GPs, a member of our community, actually texted me at 6:15 a.m. Erev Rosh Hashanah to say, I've been checking the results, Elisheva's come back negative, you can go to shul. So I sort of just made slichas Erev Rosh Hashanah. These are the type of stories in the rabbinate which can go into your memoir, biography, or whatever it may be, etc. But that was, yes, I mean, tremendous amount of effort which has been put in, and there's no way that we could do it by ourselves. And we are hugely indebted, just as you have your teams upon teams of those who are doing this sort of work in the community in Manchester. Likewise, here in Hendon, we couldn't possibly succeed, or in any of your United synagogues, could we succeed without that sort of teamwork. Teamwork and cooperation are absolutely vital.
I think then the most important team, as you mentioned before, is really the Robertson. No, I think the Rabbi and the Robertson are not a team. It becomes almost impossible. I find my wife often says, and I know this is probably a different discussion amongst Rabbanim, this will be an interesting one, is the idea of there's a difference between a rabbi's wife and a Robertson. Some rabbis are married to what we would call, in a traditional sense, a Robertson. You know, she wants to educate, she wants to meet, she wants to help the community grow, and she's her husband's partner. Some of them are married to rabbis' wives. In the same way, if you were a solicitor, your wife is nothing to do with your job. Some people are, their wife, they see their husband as being in the rabbinate, but that has nothing to do with them. I think more and more United Synagogues and even outside the United Synagogue are looking for what you referred to before as the rabbinic couple. Because the truth is, a Rav without his Rebbetzin is half a package. You're not really getting a full package over there. Because
again, I would say there are some notable examples where it has worked, and one of the things is, I think Rodney Barkley will recognize this. We used to talk when I was in the show about horses for courses and trying to make sure that you marry up the right Rav, Robertson, rabbinic couple or rabbi with a particular shul. I think it's invidious to go into specific examples, but there are some shuls where it's worked extremely well with a less active Robertson. It wouldn't work for me, clearly wouldn't work for you. But for example, even our own chief rabbi, Rabbi Mervis, his wife has a distinguished career as a social worker in her own right, and although she's been extremely, of course, supportive and helpful in so many different ways, has made it very clear that she doesn't view herself as a career Robertson per se. So it can work. It can work both ways.
Yeah, because Rabbi Mervis has been, even as a pulpit rabbi before he became chief rabbi, was a very successful pulpit rabbi of the United Synagogue, amongst others, and very, very well liked. Yeah.
Correct.
I would mention one other thing. I'm going to say this as a side point before we get into the next topic, which is, if anybody has specific questions, either for myself or for Rabbi Ginsbury about the rabbinate, you can feel free to mention them. We're having a good time just discussing the rabbinate, but if you want to know specifics and the questions fit in and we can try to make it part of the discussion, we will try to make it part of the discussion. So I want to, I guess, move on into the rabbinic family, really. So how did you or your children, I guess you even growing up as a rabbi's son, you might have had a similar experience, but how did you or your children cope with being the rabbi's son, the rabbi's daughter? Is that something that they relish? Is it something that brought out the best in them? Is that something that they really disliked? And different children have different temperaments. So how have you found that with your children?
I think you're absolutely right, and you'd probably have to go and do market research with each of our kids, and ask them exactly how they felt about it, and each one felt differently. I think that in the main, it only added to the breadth and the fullness of their experience, the richness of their experience of life. It's interesting in the book Rabbinic Counseling, which is one of the 4 that I featured in my article in Mishpacha over this past weekend. Rabbi Levitz there quotes this thing about making space for the rabbinic family. We were always very particular to make sure that we had 2 weeks in the year when we would get away as a family and have family time together. We tried to ensure, I mean, it is difficult. There are times when you get a particular call when you have to respond immediately, and there is just nothing you can do about it. At our 10th anniversary at Raleigh Close, our eldest son, Nosson, spoke, and he referred to the fact that when we lived in Manchester, Upper Park Road, there's a little sort of roundabout at the end of the road. And he said on the number of occasions he can remember as kids, we were on our way out on a Chol Hamoed outing, phone went, somebody had an urgent need. It was usually someone who was either an extremist or someone who passed away. And the car turned round, we went back, and sorry kids, we'll be going out tomorrow, we're not going out today. The kids learned to sort of to live with that. But in the main, really, so many people who have become part of our extended family have added hugely to whom what we are. Dr. David Pelkovitz, who's another one of these specialists quoted and who's written in this book on rabbinic counseling, he makes the observation that although many children of Rabbonim do not themselves actually go into the rabbinate, generally, and I think Rabbi Levitz backs us up with statistics as well, generally it's found that the children of Rabbonim, the people in the rabbinate, Rabbonim and Robertsons, their children are generally more communally active, communally minded and engaged than their peers may be. So even if it doesn't play out necessarily from one generation to the next in terms of the rabbinate, the sense of communal responsibility, outward lookingness that's something which I think very much is ingrained into the children, and it's one of the side benefits which goes together with perhaps sometimes what are seen as the disadvantages to family life as far as the commitment to the rabbinate is concerned.
Yeah. I mean, I can think of 2 examples within your children, one from a son-in-law and one of your sons, actually. So I know Rabbi Chaim Erntroy, who's now assistant principal at Mesivta down the road. So he's married to your daughter Devorah. So that's very communally minded. And then just this summer, as I was mentioning to you before in a conversation, I got to meet your son Moshe, who lives in Gateshead, who's now the gabbai there of their shul. They have a small shul for young working people, actually. So, this is Gateshead, and Gateshead has changed around now, being more accepting of the working class, if you want to call it as such, for Gateshead. But that they would, and he's the guy by there, and he runs things over there. Oh, and this, I don't know all of your children, but I'm sure I met Nosson. Nosson's really somebody who's full of energy when I met him at your daughter's chasna, and I'm sure he's quite he does a lot for the community as well. I'm sure he can, and he has tremendous koiches. I find that my children have somehow gained that also. I think there's a certain confidence that they bring.
I particularly want to mention, while you're mentioning the kids, to mention Yitzi. I know some of the kids are on the call this evening, but Yitzi has been well known. I know
Ronnie's got it here. Ronnie's just mentioned it in the comments.
Yes, so many of you have davened for his refuah, and Baruch Hashem, he is bli ayin hara. He's doing well. He still has to be careful, but is doing so much better health-wise, bli ayin hara. But the work that he does for Jewel and other communal activities in the community is truly remarkable. He's actually making a significant professional career out of lay support for all sorts of different areas in the community, and we're extremely proud of the contribution that he and each of the children are making in their own ways. They bli ayin hara, really, we are extremely blessed in that context.
Yeah, Baruch Hashem. I mean, I do know Yitzhak. I shouldn't have left him out as well. But I look at my children, and I find my children aren't at that stage yet where they can become communally minded. But I do find, for example, that my children, certain things that they pick up within the shul, sometimes more positive, and sometimes, maybe on a negative sense. We've often said that our children feel sometimes a little bit too comfortable amongst adults. My children are sitting at Shalosh Shuddis, and they're having a laugh with all the people sitting around them, with David Langer and with Raymond Roth and with Ian Creek and with Adam Shoga and whoever else is sitting around them, and they're having conversations. And sometimes they've said, they're on first name basis with some people that could be my father, forgetting about their father. And I said to them, you need to call them Uncle so-and-so, whatever it is. And the person says to me, no, Rabbi, it's okay. I said, no, please allow me to give my child the education that you're 50 years older than him, and he needs to treat you a little bit more respectfully. He's not your peer. It's nicer to sit together with you. And I think children of Rabbonim, sometimes they get they're able to converse more easily with, as you said, they get a certain breadth. My children can converse very easily with Haredi children, but also very easily with people from our communities that have a very different experience, and they're able to. Okay, we'll come back to that in a minute, Clive. They're able to really reach out to all sorts of people, and I find it gives them, many of them, a certain confidence that they're able to come with. I actually have an interesting story. This is a true story that happened to us. It's something that I'm always very proud of. We met this couple on the way home, and they said, "Oh, good Shabbos, Rabbi Esmer." I said, "Good Shabbos, how are you?" I said, "Yeah. Did you just have?" I can't remember if it was a son. I think it was a daughter. Did you just have a daughter that ran ahead about 50 meters ahead of you? I said, "Yeah. Our daughter was coming home. She was running ahead of us." He said, "Yeah. Well, she walked past us, and she said good Shabbos." She must have been 5 or 6 at the time, but she said good Shabbos with such gusto and with such confidence as she walked past a set of adults. And I said to my wife, "That's Rabbi Eisenberg's daughter." I don't know who else that's going to be. That's got to be Rabbi Eisenberg's daughter. And now that I meet you 50 meters down the road, I see I was actually right.
Very nice. Very nice.
It's interesting, but I believe that, whilst you are many times you're under a tremendous amount of scrutiny, so they also get that. So we have here 2 interesting questions. Maybe we'll start with Clive's question first, because it came, let's do Sheila's first, because Sheila's is still with the children, then we'll come back to Clive's question. So Sheila's asking the question, do children feel that their congregation is an extended family? Well, let's start with you, Rabbi Ginsburg.
Yeah. I think very much so. Very, very much so. And just as we said before, that the opportunity for connection is there, is open to the rabbi, to the Robertson. Likewise, to the same with the children. I think sometimes you have to be a little bit careful. One of the things is that the temptation is sometimes, as the rabbi says from the pulpit, to quote something that may have happened with the children, and the children won't always be appreciative of that. One's got to sometimes be just that little bit more sensitive and careful in terms of the sort of the boundaries and the parameters. But in the main, yes, and I can say also as a child growing up, I was aware of the fact that some of the people in my father's community who were really, really nice to me, were like sort of extended uncles, almost like quasi-grandparents, were actually giving my father a little bit of grief here and there, as far as being the rabbi of the community, and it was very interesting when stepping into the rabbinate to realize that there can be a sense of personal connection, and yet professionally there can be this certain degree of actually necessary and healthy tension between the rabbi and his lay leaders. But yes, Sheila, I think you've got it absolutely. This sense of extended family and warmth is something which is very special. And I know one thing, that every single one of our simchas has been enhanced by that sense of participation of the community. They felt their simcha is our simchas. We felt that their simchas have also been, that we've been intimately involved in them as well.
Mm-hmm. I would add to that also, Sheila, an interesting question. I think it all depends on how you portray the community to your children. So if you see your community as part of your extended family, if that's how you let your children see it, then your children will pick that up from you, and they will automatically see the congregation as part of their family as well. Yes, like as you mentioned before, you're going on a Chalamoy trip, but if somebody in the family wasn't well, you for sure would have turned around. So now with somebody else that wasn't well, so why wouldn't we turn around? If children, it's something that you need to teach your children. But if you can, and the other way around also, I think there are Rabbanim, as we mentioned before, not present company included, but there are Rabbanim who are really almost fed up of their communities, and they come home and they tell their children about this one, about that one, and how difficult it is, etc., etc. These children grow up resenting the community because they see that their parents, even though they have to come into shul, they all have to be full of smiles and everything, deep down they really resent the kehillah. And that's a real issue. So I'd like to come to Clive Moss-Barkley's question now. He says, on the fly, we mentioned about social media and the internet. How do you and your families cope with this? So maybe I'll start on this one. My family is a little bit younger. I think your family is already almost grown up by the time this became almost so it is quite difficult. So I think we'll deal with each one separately, the social media and the internet. I would say that even for myself, and this is part of my Rebbetzin being behind me, my Rebbetzin is very into the fact that social media is in the main something that's a waste of time and that brings a certain amount of evils with it. It has good uses and needs to be used for those good uses, but for those good uses only. And otherwise, you could end up wasting a tremendous amount of time and creating relationships with people, or spending a tremendous amount of time with people that really you would never have. You should be spending this time with people in your community. So you can use social media like here. You can put things out to Raleigh Close and to the Shrubberies and to America and to Eretz Yisrael. How wonderful that we can use social media like Facebook and like YouTube to be able to broadcast a share like that. But I know people that sit and spend hours and hours wasting time clicking on YouTube or going and scrolling through Facebook and just doing absolutely nothing. So social media is something where my wife has always been very circumspect, and therefore I've been more careful with it. And my children know that it's not something that I personally carry around with me on my phone. If it's something I need to do, I'll do it on my computer. And they realize it's something where we've created a bit of a barrier. The internet as well, the internet is a tremendous tool. It's enabled us to do so much, but on the other hand, the internet has with it also its challenges. And children need to know, and they need to realize that daddy and mommy also understand and realize that there are challenges with the internet, and daddy and mommy also put in their different boundaries to make sure that the internet doesn't become a challenge for them. And if we don't do that, then our children will say, well, if the parents are so flippant with the internet, then we'll be flippant with the internet. Now, even if we're flippant with the internet, chances are as adults, in most cases, will make better decisions. But what do you expect from teenage boys who have free access, unfettered access to the internet? I've spoken to many people, and when they go and they have a look through their children's internet history, their hair stands on edge. But what you have sometimes only yourself to blame for that.
Yeah. I think there are three different areas to consider in social media and internet. First and foremost, and we've discussed this a lot in terms of online programming during the pandemic, what we've achieved through Zoom, through the different platforms we've used, the United States itself having created its new US TV channel, is truly remarkable. And in fact, we can very proud that it's an old Shrubs boy who's now directing that move within the US. Stephen Verber's son, Richard, is the head of the US sort of PR team and doing an amazing job in that particular area, which really is doing a tremendous job for us, for the United Synagogue as a whole. And it's remarkable. It's remarkable what we've been able to achieve. But the question is, what happens, PCPG as we call it, post-COVID, post-please God? What's going to happen? Are we going to just carry on sort of saying, oh, this is such a great way of doing things virtually, we'll carry on with that? Or will we go back to sort of more real? Will we have more in-person programming, or will we have more virtual programming? And I think it's really important to realize that for all the value of what we're doing virtually, nothing comes close to that in-person connection. I remember the late Dain Gershon Lopin used to say that much more than any of his shurim and droshes achieved, his wife's chulent achieved with the visitors they would have at home at Shabbos lunch. One of the things I remember very fondly from our early days in Shrubs was the power of the Shul Ladies Guild. And again, I'm going to start missing out names, but if I think about people like Rika Mintz, if I think about people like Joan Merwitzer, if I think about people like Margaret Clark, and so many others who were engaged at the time, it was just a remarkable thing to see how, okay, the world has moved on, the world has changed. That doesn't necessarily speak to people nowadays, but it was just incredible. And this in-person connection. And the problem is that if we allow the ersatz virtual world to become our main focus, then actually in terms of the depth of relationship, the truth of spiritual connection, why do people think, for example, that a service by Zoom can be as good, if not better, than the real thing? Because there's not an in-depth connection with the soul of what it means to have a minyan, a tefillah b'tzibur, people actually gathering together, sublimating, if you like, some of my own personal ego and preferences to the benefit of the tzibur. As a tzibur, you daven together, and I don't like the way this one shokels, and I don't like the way that this one coughs, and I don't like the way that this one sits, and I don't like the way that this one reads. But actually, I just love the fact that we're a tzibur who comes together and we daven as a minyan. So I think that's an incredibly important thing, to be able to not allow the world of the virtual to seem more alluring, more attractive. There's so many studies which have documented the rise in selfishness and dysfunctionality which arises from people making connections through their screen rather than through investing in the proper in-person connection relationship. I personally have never tried to cultivate a social media presence. It does happen. So if you Google Rabbi Mordechai Ginsburg, you'll see all different things. But those have more happened by virtue of activities I've been involved with than things that I've actually tried to cultivate. And I just don't have any interest in that. I really, I see Mindy Wisdom coming up, a very good friend of Judy and myself, and so many of us in the Hendon community agreeing with that particular point. I think it's funny, actually, it was your son Baruch, Mindy, who raised this question with me once about the davening virtually and Kaddish and Minyonim and Tefillah without the in-person presence. So yes, I mean, that's very powerful, but social media, you've got to be so careful of that. Likewise, internet, to make sure that just like the famous relationship between Reb Meir and Acher, when Reb Meir was questioned how he could learn from Acher, who had gone on the pathways of apostasy, and Reb Meir had the ability to be able to take out the juice, to take out that which was the positive and to cast aside that which was the negative. Not all of us have that ability. That one of our children who you mentioned before, Moshe, has become quite an expert in IT and is well known in Gateshead for that and further afield, etc. And the importance of filters, the importance, not just because of the risk of the extreme edges of being exposed to the ugly stuff that one can get from the internet, but it's, as you say, just the time wasting, just the fact that you're surfing half alert, half not alert, when you could be actually improving and growing in serious, meaningful, genuine connection rather than quasi superficial and actually illusory connection.
Very good. So I think maybe, and this is the last topic that I was going to discuss. If anybody has any other questions, please bring them up. Corona, really, and the difference that Corona has made for us as Rabbonim. I think that on the one hand, it's opened up certain vistas, it's opened up certain programs such as this one. On the other hand, it's really made things a lot more difficult for us. I know I spoke to David Mintz once, and he said, Rama, you seem so frustrated. And I said to him, I said, listen, David, imagine if you had to sell somebody a house. David's an estate agent. Imagine if you had to sell somebody a house by showing them the downstairs toilet. Come inside, here's the downstairs toilet. Come outside, would you like to buy the house or not? I said, you couldn't do that either. I feel like I've been handcuffed. And most of what I do, or most of what I really love about the community, is the coming together, is the Kiddush after davening, is this speaking to people. So in 9 or 10 months, yes, I've called many people on Bikur Cholim calls, but I've not visited anybody. The Kiddush afterwards, we don't have. People are sitting 2 meters apart and you don't even see their facial expression. You can't sing too loud in shul because then that lets droplets get around and that's dangerous. Again, I'm not saying this in a negative way about anybody making comments about singing too loud. That's the facts. There's all these rules that have been put into place, and it feels like almost the soul of the shul has been sucked out of the shul, and it's been replaced very much with a very almost too formal service that has gotten rid of almost all the human element. And I think that Corona, one of the things that you mentioned before, is that Corona has taken away a lot of that human element, and on the other hand, has given tremendous opportunities. So, I mean, as you mentioned some of them, but what would you say what has Corona brought out, and what has Corona sort of made problematic in your instance?
So I'm noticing we're at the hour mark, and I know you have a chavrus or other commitments.
It's been cancelled actually. So okay. I'm not that much in a rush, but we're going to try and wrap up if there's nobody else that's going to ask.
I think the golden rule of the rabbinate is, leave everybody feeling I'd have liked 5 minutes more than 5 minutes less.
Absolutely.
So I don't think we want to extend things too long or too far, but just reflecting on the elements of Corona and the overall perspective, and this is really a big perspective. One of the things that I think as Rabbanim we have to do is to both personally by example, but also by the way we teach, we preach, we behave, to model a way to get through things. And what we have to realize is that there are sometimes times in life where Gamze Yavor, this is not the first pandemic, and if Mashiach Chas v'Shalom doesn't come within the next goodly number of years, there may well be other pandemics in the future. Again, they say roughly once every century there's a pandemic. And, it's remarkable when you think about the modern day and age, compare this pandemic to the Spanish flu pandemic of 1918 and compare, it's horrendous what Corona has done, but compare that and the way we've been able to protect ourselves, albeit by withdrawal from so much of that which is familiar, but actually to protect and save tens of millions of lives. And I'm not diminishing the losses. They've been so painful, and one life lost, and in this country now, what's the figure, 72,000 or something, and growing, and across the world, horrendous. But what we do have to say is, you know what? we'll get through this. We'll get through this one day at a time. It's a slightly different modality. It's not what we're used to. It's not a lechatchila. But, we have to stay a little bit sort of calm, make the most of what we can from each day. And there are indeed different ways in which certain pressures and certain expectations have been substituted by others, and we will get back on track as well. I do believe that 4 to 5 years' time, we will actually look back and we will see that, yes, there was a year, 18-month, 2-month sort of hole in normal life, but the normal life, I don't know how it will be with offices, with remote working exactly. I'm not a prophet, not the son of a prophet. I'm not even able to make much of a profit. That's why I'm a rabbi. I'm a prophet in terms of the ET rather than the FIT. But I do try the fitness. We haven't gone into that even, but I do work out a couple of times a week. My svelte figure may belie that, but I do try and do that and keep on top of health, which I would encourage everybody to do, especially through the pandemic, to ensure that one does maintain some form of regime of keep fit, etc. But above all else, in terms of the perspective, the holistic perspective, what life is about, we shouldn't become too phased, too blown off course. We're actually going to be discussing this very subject tomorrow night. There's my little plug again at our Hendon. We actually have a Hendon 3-part series of UK Lockdown 2.0, Keeping Calm, Carrying On and More, which you can engage with on Zoom number 193973537. I'll send that through to Rabbi Eisenberg afterwards, and he can post that for anyone who's interested to follow that Zoom.
You put it in a private chat, and then David will put it onto the comments. If you type it through to David soon, so that's
193973537, commencing tomorrow night at 8:30 p.m. with Rabbi Dr. Ari Sitman, and then a conversation between myself and two of my local colleagues, Rabbi Daniel Roslau from Ale Zion, and also Rabbi Koenigsberg, who is the he's actually son-in-law of Jeremy Michelson. So there's a Shrubberies connection. Cyril and Elsie Silkove, their grand son-in-law. And we're having a conversation about from theory to practice, lessons from Jewish teachings of life, which can help us stay the course through the current challenging times. So I would say that, yes, whilst you look at the specific and it looks pretty bleak and it looks pretty difficult, actually learning to cope and having a bigger picture and perspective, and the emunah that the Rebbeinu Shalom at the end of the day, who has, for his best known reasons, led us into this pandemic, will also lead us out of it. And we should even see that the vaccine, which everyone's looking for, sort of that critical element, is also something which, through the will of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, is something that, please God, will prove successful and will make a difference to our lives and help us get back on track. We'll get there. And this is a temporary, bit more than a blip, certainly, but this is a temporary phase rather than, chas v'sholem, a complete breakdown in everything that's familiar and matters to us. We'll get back to the Kiddushim, we will get back to the in-person activities, and we will get back to the grandeur of everything that the very best of beautiful Kehillah life at Shrubberies and at Riley Close represents.
Oh, man, wow. So I was going to finish off, and I'll just finish off on that idea that, yes, as you said, we are going through a very, very difficult time, but as you said, it's not going to be forever. And I think the other thing is that this period has also given people a chance to really focus and to, people say they pivot. That's like a new word that they use when they started. But I think people have not only pivoted in their jobs, but I think people have pivoted in their priorities in life. So people have suddenly said, you know what? I thought I had to work X amount of hours in the office. I can't even go to the office now. Mm-hmm. I'm working from home, et cetera, et cetera. One of the things that I started to appreciate so much in the summer when my kids were home for 4 or 5 months on the trot, start appreciating teachers. Do you know what it takes to be a teacher day in, day out? So I can do my work and I can do my job, and my wife can do her work and her job because I have these people that are willing to give up their entire day to take care of my children and to educate them. And when I had to educate them, I barely had time to do that and to do my job as a rabbi. It was very, very difficult. So you start appreciating the work-life balance much, much better. what you said before about exercise. I was exercising quite a bit, but one of the things I started now during lockdown, the weather was better then, it was easier, is I started running. So Drinkwater Park is where I like to go, and we go on a 5K run. I go sometimes with my son, sometimes, you know, I had this just this Friday, I had a lovely thing. My wife we were finished early for Shabbat. So she says, yeah, if you want to go out for a run, go out for a run. And I said, Moshe, you're off, come, let's go. So Moshe says, yeah, he loves running, he comes with me. We went on a 5K run, and when we were finished, he says, okay, Daddy, now it's time for a selfie. So I'm not a big selfie guy, but when your son says, now it's time for a selfie, it's such a nice feeling. That's coming back to the idea of the technology, and kids appreciating the technology more than their parents. So we went, and, you know, here you go, you have a selfie, and you feel very accomplished I did something for myself, for my health, and a relationship thing with my son, and that's something that I never did before it came around. So it's all these different things that happen in Mitzvah Hashem. As we said, we will get through it. Please make the most of all the lessons that you can learn tonight, but also that has been taught to you throughout the pandemic. Appreciating your family, appreciating life, appreciating just the simple things in life. Who appreciated? My wife said to me, the first thing that she realized now when she had COVID, she couldn't taste. She said, for 40 years, I never thanked Hashem for taste buds. Now everything tastes like cardboard. How wonderful it is to be able to taste food. You get all these wonderful lessons and these things that COVID teaches you. So hopefully, Mitzvah Hashem, you know, this, as we said, COVID has had the positive thing that we've been able to do this program together. Thank you so much to everybody that tuned in, to people that tuned in. I see from Whitefield, from Shrubberies, from America, from Eretz Yisrael, from Hendon. Thank you to Rabbi Ginsbury for agreeing last minute to be our guest over here. It's always wonderful to speak to you, and I must say that I've since our first conversation in Whitefield, when I was in the Whitefield Call, I mentioned to you yesterday, and when you were being Masada Kedushin together with Rabbi Gutentag in Whitefield, and we sat in the office and we spoke for an hour. We spent many, many hours on the phone, and I've received so much invaluable advice from you. And it's been really, really useful. So thank you so much. Robert reminds us there's a Tuesday tea at 2. Robert, put in the Zoom details if you wanted to. We're going to be having Christian Wakeford, who is the MP for Barry, is going to be there. If you have any questions for him, it's 2 o'clock. It's open to all. You don't have to be a member of the Shrubberies to join this. Rabbi Ginsbury mentioned also the program they're having tomorrow night on Royal Clothes. Please could you just mention that Zoom number one more time if anybody wants to take note of it? 193-973-537. 8:30 p.m. tomorrow night. 8:30 p.m. tomorrow night. Thank you so much. Thank you, Eddie, for joining us. Mitzvah Hashem, we should be able to come together in real life next time. But until then, please tune in again. We have these programs every Sunday night. We'd love to see all of you coming back, whether you are from whatever country or whatever community you come from. Thank you, Rabbi Ginsbury, for joining us tonight. Thank you, Rabbi Eisenberg. Good night, everybody. Thank you. Good night. Good night. Good night.